And so, yeah, I mean, there's a big clinical trial in Europe across 17 sites, and it was a huge effect. So we are submitting for approval now. It's not approved on the market yet. Hope to have that later this year.
For those watching who have never heard of a brain-computer interface, what is it? And what have people been able to do? What are they able to do now?
So the brain is this powerful computer, but it's encased in the skull. Like, it is not magically connected to things. And so it has these handful of connections to the world. And these give you the senses that you know and the motor control that you know. But you can kind of ask, like, is that, so either do we want to replace these with something else? So for example, like the simulated reality or the Matrix use case. Another is restoring lost functionality. So this is how they're deployed today. So if someone has gone blind, you can restore the ability to see. If they've gone deaf, you can restore the ability to hear. If they're paralyzed, you can restore the ability to move. And then you can think about structural neural engineering. And this is the thing that we haven't gotten to as a field as much. But looking at how does the brain process information? Can you add new brain areas? Are there ways to understand how the brain is, like, what is going on, either to use this to build smarter machines or to think about how to treat things like depression or addiction?
I'm taken by to what degree right now it's about sort of taking someone who has a condition or a disease and then bringing them, like, sort of restoring them to, like, sort of capability, right? I think that's playing out in AI right now as well, right? Like, you had computers that had no ability to do, like, any sort of pure cognition or, like, no neurons, and then suddenly a bunch of neurons, and then AGI is sort of like what a human can do. It's sort of like a restoration of capability. And then, of course, there's like this other thing after that, which is, ASI, super intelligence. Do you ever think about what that might be down the road? What is that for BCI?
There are many types of BCIs. So it really is going to be a category like pharma. It's not one product. I don't think there's going to be like the BCI that people get. And there are different modalities that will work for different things. So for example, I don't work on ultrasound, but one of the things that I think will be possible with ultrasound is like a digital Ambien or like a digital Adderall. So can you, like, stimulate part of the brain to cause focus or sleep and things like that? Would not surprise me if that was possible. And I could see as being more of a consumer application almost. And that won't require brain surgery, hopefully. Right now, the high quality ultrasound stuff does require drilling through the skull, but I think that will be overcome. For the implantable BCIs, this is a very serious brain surgery. I think that's important to appreciate. So when you think about how do you actually get this into humans and who's going to use it, these are going to be very disabled patient populations. You always look at risk reward. You start at the most disabled patients, you get the most benefit for even relatively basic functionality. Like, I don't think that you or I would want to get one of the cortical motor decoders that you might have seen out there today, because the reality is that, like, a keyboard and mouse is, like, great. It is a much higher performance. You can get, like, spoken word is like 40 bits per second. Many people can type in the, like, 20-ish bits. And so the 10 bit per second cortical motor decode is, like, not going to make your life better. I wouldn't get serious brain surgery for that. Now, as it gets more powerful and as we are able to produce kind of access richer representations from more of the brain, especially bidirectionally, then you'll start to see, like, the risk benefit change, where, like, my view on this is not that I think healthy 30-year-olds are going to be getting these soon, but eventually many people become patients. Aging is like the correlate of kind of everything getting worse. And so there's some critical age where it kind of crosses over, where it makes sense to have something that will restore some functionality that you had. And then eventually that will kind of cross the origin. And then you'll see people that had something terrible happen to them who now have a capability that you're jealous of. And that will be kind of when you start to see it changing.
Talk to me about how people who maybe never had sight, why was the optic nerve not actually set up? Like, is that not something that you can do later? How does plasticity fit in? Do you have to get BCIs when you're incredibly young while the brain is still plastic? Like, how does all this come together?
Neuroplasticity is really interesting and really misunderstood. There are genuine critical periods in early development that if you miss them, there are some things that will be very hard to wire up later. There actually are some cases of patients that were born blind who, but it wasn't a loss of the optic nerve, it wasn't something in the brain, but they had congenital cataracts. So their vision was blurry from birth and they were never able to really form images, who then had this fixed as adults. And that did not work. Like, this was, their brain could not make sense of the information. It was totally overwhelming. They would wear eye patches. Several of them committed suicide.
Oh my God.
And so there are clear critical periods in early development where if you miss that, some things are not going to work. With that said, the brain stays way more plastic throughout life and adulthood than I think is widely appreciated.
That's a relief.
Yeah, if I put an electrode almost anywhere in your brain and then wake you up during surgery, and I show you a flashing light that flashes proportionally to how much that neuron is firing, at least almost anywhere in cortex, within a couple minutes you can learn to control like that neuron. And so the brain is very plastic under feedback. And this is partly how the cortical motor decoders work. Some of it is you're decoding what the brain was originally representing, in terms of like a hand or arm representation, but also just if you're getting these signals out of the brain and you're giving the patient feedback for like what those signals are doing, then the brain also adapts to you. And so in the first experiments for this, they actually didn't fit anything at all. They just took they took 2 neurons or a handful of neurons and fixed the weights. So it said, when this neuron fires more, we're going to go up the screen. When this neuron fires more, we're going to go down the screen and sideways. They fixed the weights and let the brain figure it out, let the brain learn. And again, the brain is very plastic under feedback and it can do this.
A powerful moment. You have we have 2 learning systems that can learn off of one another instead of sort of a fixed one with if statements on this side.
Totally. Yeah. And the brain really, like if you give the cortex information, it is really good at extracting the meaning. Now in adulthood, I think one of the reasons that you don't see it as being so plastic is because it has already fit well to reality. And so there's like, if you think of it as this like energy surface and like the state of brain states is this, like you've got these hills and valleys. So during normal development, typically for most people, there's this like enormous basin in this energy surface. And so for most people, like during development, you descend into this basin and then you're down there and it's stable because you've like fit to reality. And if I show you like weird movies, it's not going to really push you out of that. You can, I think like one of the theories of what psychedelics do is they kind of add energy, kind of anneal it. So it kind of shrinks the surface a little bit. So you kind of access these other states, but then when it wears off, you just immediately descend back down into the energy well that the brain had fit to. And so even though the brain is still plastic, it is in this stable, like part of the attractor system so that you don't see the plasticity as much.
But this was selected for.
This was absolutely selected for, yeah. And so there's this tension between there absolutely is ongoing plasticity. If there wasn't plasticity, you couldn't learn things. And so like your ability to learn new stuff is like, and have memory, like all memory is brain plasticity in many ways. And so we are constantly experiencing very dramatic plasticity, but there are also clear limits to it, especially in how like the modules of the different brain areas end up interconnected past these critical periods.
I have like a million questions, honestly. I mean, one of the things that I'm super curious about is like, well, what is the qualia of the person who has Prima? And what is, I'd be curious, like with the biohybrid approach, like what does it feel like? And,
yeah.
Is it like having a second screen? Like, is there input or output? I'm very curious.
Yeah. So for Prima, actually, on the topic of plasticity, in the time that the patients are blind, the brain wants to see. Like again, the thing you experience is this world model constructed by the brain, and that is this generative model that is conjuring your reality. And so when it's not getting input from the optic nerve, it is still trying to see things. So it kind of turns up the noise, and so. Blind patients often report like hallucinations and these like internally generated percepts. When you first turn on the implant in these patients, like you hit it with the laser, they'll say, "Oh, I see a flash," but then you can do a thing where you'll turn on the laser, they'll see a flash, and you'll play a tone, and you do this a couple times, and then you like don't turn on the laser, but you play the tone, and they're like, "I see the flash." And so for the first couple hours of rehab, they kind of just have to like learn to like dissociate the real percepts from the phantom percepts, because the brain is like so turned up the gain, turned down the noise floor, that just like learning how to discriminate real information coming in from the optic nerve takes a little bit of rehab. The qualia of Prima is normal sight. It's black and white. It's a small field of view, but it's vision. The deeper question is like, what is the quality of like a brain to brain, of like an ultra high bandwidth, like a biohybrid neural interface? And that is just like, impossible to imagine. Those devices will get built and we're going to find out, but there are some natural case studies. So there's a pair of conjoined twins in Canada that it's really like one head with 4 hemispheres. And what's really interesting is that the 2 hemispheres of each of the twins' brains are connected normally, but they're not connected with each other, except for this one cable connecting the thalami, like from the thalamus to thalamus. There's this big biological cable that you can see on an MRI. And over this, they can share meaningful elements of their conscious experience. And one of the open questions that hasn't really been studied in the depth that I would love to see it, is when they can see to some degree through each other's eyes, but does this show up as new visual field? Like, how do those get experienced directly? Like, most people have two image modes. Like, you've got your eye open vision, but you also have imagination. Some people are aphantasic and they don't have internal imagery. Most people have kind of two image modes. Do they have three image modes or four image modes? Or if they have internal monologue, they seem to each individually have internal monologue, but they also can clearly communicate over this channel because they've done tasks where they can coordinate without saying anything to do stuff.
And they're conscious of it.
And they're conscious of it. And it also, they don't confuse it for each other. It's not like with a schizophrenic where it's like, oh, I'm hearing voices and that they're coming from internally generated me. It's misattributed monologue. That doesn't happen to them. They can tell it apart. But they're experiencing it directly in some way. And so there's a question of, is this, like, when you look at that cable, are they sending the information in the classical way, or is there like an effective phenomenal binding happening over this cable where it's more like the two hemispheres of your brain that are bound together into one moment? And so there's these natural case studies that tell us that some really interesting things might be possible here, but it's kind of tough to imagine what it would feel like.